You know, sometimes all it takes is just a little accessory. My granddaughter gave me this, and it wasn't quite me, but it was my giraffe, so I brought it along. So this is looking pretty spiffy, and you do look spiffy. And I have to admit that just cooperation is always a good thing. We'll just kind of leave it at that. Anyway, you know what? I'll let you hold. How about that? Okay. Where the word spiffy comes in is because there's this book, The Spiffiest Giant in Town. And there are things about, you know, when you say someone's looking spiffy, look at your grandpa there. You know, his hair's all in order, his facial hair is trimmed. I mean, he's sitting there.
Wait a minute, that's sitting pretty, your facial.
No, I said trimmed. Yours is trimmed. True. Oh, yes.
Ask Linda.
And I put a new shirt on today, and I'll be honest, I felt spiffy. You know why? Did you ever see these that have there? My granddaughter had one of these shirts, and when I was on the clearance rack, and I saw one, and I thought, and I told her, I said, wow, I'm going to be, and we do use that word because my mom always told us we were spiffy and looked spiffy. So I got this, and I said, Eden, I have the shirt, it's so cool, it's spiffy. And she said, gee, I outgrew all of mine. So it does not matter. But anyway, we're all spiffy in the eyes of God. We know that. But this book talks about, and this was another one given to my daughter when she was going through to be a teacher, and people knew she loved books. But this giant, I don't know that I can, you know, read this like that, but George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town.
There you go.
He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. And do you think that, you know, God doesn't matter what we wear, does he? I remember one time being a teenager, and that mattered to me. And you know what my dad said when I wasn't ready for Sunday school and church? He said, you don't have to go this week. And I looked at him because I said I wasn't ready. And he said, if that's what matters, and sorry, this does choke me up because it's something I've remembered all my life. My dad said, I'm going to go shopping, and I'm going to buy you anything you want. And I'm going to take it, and I'm going to set it on the chair of your Sunday school class. And then I'll move it into church, and because that's what matters. You know what? I never worried about what I wore before. It was always nice and clean and pressed, and I went to church for the right reasons. So it is something that I've always remembered. And I know, Dad, there are many other things you reminded me along the way. So anyway, he was feeling sad. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of spiffy clothes. So guess what he bought? A spiffy shirt, a spiffy pair of pants, a spiffy belt, a spiffy striped tie, some spiffy socks, and a pair of spiffy shiny shoes. Now I'm the spiffiest giant in town, he said proudly. So there he was. George left his old clothes behind in the shop. Oh, they're trying to look at all of them. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the sidewalk, he was all dressed, yes, was a giraffe who was sniffling sadly. What's the matter? asked Georgie. It's my neck, said the giraffe. It is so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a long, warm scarf. Cheer up, said George, and he took off his striped tie. It didn't match my socks anyway, he said, as he wound it around and around the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. Thank you, said the giraffe. That's one of my favorites, giraffes. That's why I have him and many others. So anyway, and I think that is just fascinating to think of how God created that giraffe with that real long neck. Or maybe because they're always taller than me and I'm not very tall. Maybe that's why I think they're so spiffy. As George strode towards the town, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." So there he goes, strolling off, everybody looking at him, but a very happy giraffe. George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat." What do you think George could do about it, Aubrey? Yeah. "Cheer up." "Yes, exactly," said George, and he took off his new white shirt. It kept coming untucked anyway, he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. "Look at that. Ooh, that's looking good." George strode on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." Oh, here he comes. Whoa, look at those little creatures. Mice. George came to a tiny ruined house. Behind the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's our house," squeaked Mother Mouse. "It burned down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house." What do you think George could give them? Oh, did you know this book? You're just spiffy, you know this. "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said, as the mouse and her baby scrambled inside. The shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked, and there they are. So George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. But look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." What do you think George might give him? "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his socks with diamonds on the sides. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said, as the fox snuggled into it. It made a fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. That is a big sock if you get a fox in there. George hopped on, singing to himself. Anybody remember? "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. But look me up and down." And what's he say? "I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a big, squishy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." What do you think now? His other shoe? Let's see. "No, cheer up," said George, and he took off his spiffy new belt. It was squeezing my tummy anyway. Can any of us relate to that? He said as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. Mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. But my pants are falling down. I am the coldest giant in town." Suddenly George felt sad and shivery and not at all spiffy. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes," he decided. He turned around and hopped all the way back to the shop. He has polka dot shorts on. But when he got there, it was closed. Oh no, Exactly, Pastor Jeff. Oh no, cried George. He sank down onto the sidewalk and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then out of the corner of the eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. What do you think it was? Yes, George took a closer look. My gown, he yelled, my dear old gown and sandals. George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. I'm the coziest giant in town, he cried, and he danced back home along the road. But guess what? He got home and outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. Come on, George, they said, open it. George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. Look inside the card, George, said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. Look at that big crown. It took all those working together, didn't it, to get that for him. Inside it said, you gave your scarf to a cold giraffe. Your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe was a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped the dog who was crossing the bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town.
That's spiffy.
So that is spiffy. And you know what? It just goes to show that all those little things that came together were important to him at the time. But what was inside of him, he didn't need to cover it up with anything different outside, did he? And that those things all coming together made a difference to so many. And that's just like we have the opportunity coming up with our Operation Christmas Child. The many little things that we put in here will make a big difference to many out there. So the more boxes that we fill and bring in, that love and that kindness will be scattered everywhere. Let's take a moment for a prayer, okay, Audrey? You hold that one and I'll hold this one, okay? Dear God, thank you for bringing us together. We are the spiffiest church in Perry County because we love each other. We are a community. We are a family. And dear God, let us remember it's just the little things coming together, the hugs, the smiles, the remembering people, the coming together in fellowship for food, the nourishment we receive from your word. You have given us so much, dear God. Let us go out into the world, and each time we have the opportunity to encounter someone or some situation, let's remember that we can make a difference. And it's what's inside that really makes a difference. And thank you, dear God. You've given us a heart of gold, and we thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, gather